Our first main bit of information that we'll be covering for our working with website unit. Today we're specifically going to be looking at digital images. It's a good place to start. Typically I like to have all of my artwork, images, image assets, etc. ready to go before I start doing any website production processes. Obviously we need to have done a little bit of planning, but luckily the client has given us a brief with these details included. So digital images is where we'll start today. We need to first start by understanding that the images can be categorized in a couple of different ways, and the main way that we look at categorizing images is as either being a vector or as being a bitmap image type. Now, vector images, try and avoid using vector images as terminology and try and use vector graphics. Graphics are not pictures. These are bits of art that have been created using shapes, lines, curves, and text, which make it look like a picture, but are not a photograph, for example. When these graphics are expanded, there is no quality lost because the nature of these images is that they use a whole heap of mathematical formulas and processes to store information about the lines, the shapes, the angles, the curves that enable resizing without the image ever blurring. So this is really beneficial, particularly if we're working in large format artworks, things like company logos that might appear on a document, but also might appear on a billboard and might also appear on a TV screen and appear on a cinema screen. So where sizing up and sizing down happens quite a lot, the vector graphics are very valuable here. Main places these are used are in logos, in icons, charts, and illustrations. One of the benefit here is we typically find that the file sizes are a little bit smaller. One of the downsides are that in order to create them, you usually need some fairly advanced image editing software, programs like Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and also some of the other free versions of software can do that as well. I know the GIMP image editing software also enables these. Typical file formats you're going to be familiar with would be SVGs and EPSs. Quite often you would think of a PDF as a document, but you can have images stored in PDF also. So that's vector graphics. The second file type we look at is bitmap, sometimes called raster or raster, depending on how the pronunciation works on the video that you're learning from. The bitmap images basically deal in pixels rather than in lines, shapes, and curves. Now, a pixel is a single piece of an image, okay, a single part of an image that contains information such as the color. You put multiple pixels together and you give the illusion of artwork, and this is how photographs work. So particularly since we are in digital photograph age, when a photo is taken, all of those little bits of light that are received into the camera are converted digitally and stored as pixels. So we have rows and columns of pixels that make up an image. Now, the problem is when we expand an image, so make an image larger, that is in the bitmap or raster format, the computer needs to estimate how to do that based on the pixel data that it's got. So sometimes what happens is it ends up looking really pixelated, and you can see in the example there in the magnifying glass on the screen what I mean by pixelated. Those little squares are each individually a pixel, and what you can see is the computer has estimated how to get from the white to the black transition, and so the computer's estimated all the different shades of grey in between. Now, in a really low quality bitmap, it's going to be very pixelated. The higher the quality, means there are more pixels available, and if there are more pixels available, you can make it larger without having to estimate what it's going to look like. So some really high quality cameras are able to be printed, their photographs might be able to be printed in size A3, for example, without any distortion, but if you wanted to print them on a billboard, you'd see massive pixelation. Bitmaps are what happens when we print. We use little particles of ink or particles of toner to print, and so bitmap is the process that works there. Scanners also work using bitmap, so they reflect light, capture the data based on little bits or pixels of data, as do cameras, etc. If you're familiar with JPEGs, PNGs, or GIFs, these are all bitmap file types. Typically, these are larger files, particularly in the high quality realm when you're talking big files that have a big format and can be printed on A3 or larger. They're usually quite a large file size in the megabyte size. While we're talking images, it's important to be aware of copyright legislation. Now, we have the Copyright Act in Australia, and by default, you don't need to apply for copyright. If you create something, you are given the exclusive rights to use it. Now, what I mean by this is it has to be something that is copyrightable, something that you have produced, and this could be text like a book, like a report, like any of those sorts of journal articles, artistic works, musical works, so songs, paintings, photographs. You've created a computer program, you've created a movie, you've created a new song, all of those sorts of things. You own the copyright of them just by making them. Now, by owning the copyright, you can reproduce them as many times as you want, copy and paste as many times, print as many times as you want, without there being any repercussions because you own the artwork. What that means on the flip side for us as web designers is it means we can't just go and take other people's work, take other people's photos and put them on our website without paying appropriate credit and sometimes paying appropriate fees to be able to use those artworks. Now, those fees are typically called licenses once we have been granted the permission to use them. You cannot just go to Google Images, find a picture of Nepal and upload it to your website and think that that is acceptable. Someone has taken that photo, someone has paid for the trip to Nepal, they've paid for the camera, they've used their time to capture the image, so you can't just take that in order to make money for your company. And that's where the Copyright Act comes in. Now, we have some ways that we can work around the copyright legislation, and the main way that we do that is to actually contact the owner of the image, so the original author or creator, and ask them permission to use it. If they give you permission to use it, then that is all clear. Typically though, what happens is if you find it on the internet, it might be on a website that you need to pay for. So they may sell a license where you need to buy access to that image for $12 or $100 or whatever it may be. And by paying that fee, you are then given a license to use it. And the license that you purchase will have a few restrictions on how you can use it and what you can do with it. The second way that we can work around copyright legislation, not working around it so much as working with it, is through this process of Creative Commons licenses. Imagine that you have gone to Nepal and you've taken this awesome photo, but you don't really care about making money from it. You want everyone to be able to use it in the world. You can actually share it and give it a Creative Commons license. This means that anyone can actually use your image depending on the restrictions that you place. There are a few different options. You can say, I'm happy for you to use it, but you have to put my name underneath it. I'm happy for you to use it, but you can't use it to make money. I'm happy for you to use it, but if you want to use it, you have to make some changes to it. So there are a whole heap of different specific subversions of the license that are available, and we'll go through that in class when we go to the Creative Commons website and actually start looking at collecting images that we can use on our website. Now, the benefit of Creative Commons licenses is that this is a standard way, globally standard way, to grant people permission to use your artworks so that you don't have to deal with copyright laws. The benefit of this is you don't need to think or ask the question, what can I actually do with this piece of art that I found on the web? The Creative Commons licenses tell you very clearly and very specifically what you can do with those. So I encourage you to jump onto Google, make your way to creativecommons.org, and once you're there, have a look at all of the different licenses that are available. The next thing that we need to start thinking about is image authoring tools. What programs do we have? What programs exist that we can use to edit and to author images ready to use on the web? Now, I've got 3 examples here. They're not the only 3 examples. They're just 3 examples that we'll discuss in class. You should be familiar with the first one. This is Adobe's Photoshop. This is a very common photograph manipulation tool. Typically, Photoshop is used for the editing of photos. but it can be used for the creation of vector art as well. Adobe Illustrator is typically used for the creation of vector graphics, but it can be used to edit photographs. Okay? It's best to use the specific tool for the specific purpose. So if I was creating a logo for Nepal Travel Adventures, I would elect to use Illustrator. And if I was editing an image of Nepal that I wanted to use on my website, I would be using Photoshop. The third option that I've got there is for GIMP, G-I-M-P. This is a graphical image manipulation program. This is free to use. Now this software is what we call open source, which means the source code for the program is freely available. You're permitted to go on, download the software and use it. If you want to make changes to the actual program and how it works, you can do that, as long as you comply with the rules of open source software, which is continuing to share the changes you make with the wider internet community. We're really going to be honing in on Photoshop as a tool, and so I'm going to flick through a couple slides now just to show you some of the different things that we've got available in Photoshop. But I really encourage you to go to the individual YouTube tutorials that I've shared with you that I've produced to show you all of these different options. The first, in Photoshop, I've got a video there that you might want to have a look at in terms of just navigating around Photoshop. I've shared a video with you on how you can actually remove the background from an image. There's another video on how to resize images so that they are in the appropriate pixel format that you require for your website. How to adjust the color on images, how to mask images, e.g. put patterns inside of shapes, how to add and use the filter gallery to get some preset filters to make some changes to your images, and how to export files into the format that you require for the web. There are some other ones here on how to move things around, how to change shapes of things, and how to lay images out, as well as how to use features like autocorrect. So there's quite a few videos to get you started, and then I encourage you to watch each of those, work through the tutorial, and then once we are in class together, you can work with me individually to expand that capacity. So that's the end of our image editing and image authoring component of this course. Good luck with your tutorials, and in our next video we'll be looking at the planning processes around actually nutting out what your website is going to be and look like.